Hello.
Hi, Marcy. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. We'll listen to a little bit of Hillel Tigay as folks arrive. Can everyone hear the music? Give me a thumbs up.
No,
No.
No,
Okay.
no,
no.
no,
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 I
no music.
I get the funny. Why is this?
No music.
Well, then, no music. That's the deal. Sorry.
Hey,
There'll
no
be no
music.
music in the Siddur class.
No
No, just
music.
kidding. I couldn't figure out how to make the tech work, but that's okay. Welcome, everyone. So good to see you all. We'll let a few minutes go by as folks arrive. And what I want to ask you to do in the meantime is introduce yourself via the chat. So you can write in, please, your name and one thing you hope to learn from this class. So please put into the chat your name and one thing you hope to learn from this class. And we'll give folks a few more minutes to arrive, and then we'll get started. This is your chance to tell me what you want to learn. You know, I'm going to be saving this chat and studying it afterwards, so don't be shy.
Sarah, hi, I'm Sarah. I have put this cream on my face that goes after skin cancer, so it's kind of a little horrifying to look at, but anyway, I'm okay.
Well, we're glad you're here,
I'm
Sarah.
glad,
Welcome.
yeah, glad to be here. Yeah. Yeah, I just really want to know what I'm singing, and
I'm seeing a lot of that in the chat here.
yeah.
Excellent. A lot of folks who love coming to IKAR, but don't necessarily know what's going on while you're there, or what you're singing, or how to sing it, or what the words are, or what the melodies are. I'm seeing a fair amount of that. Welcome, everyone. Okay, let's get started here. Feel free to continue adding in your introductions here into the chat. Hi, everyone. My name is Rabbi Morris Panitz. I'm one of the rabbis here at IKAR, and I'm so delighted to be with you all this evening. Thank you for signing up for this intro to the prayer book class. I think if you do just a look around the Zoom room and you see the almost 50 other people who are here with us tonight, here with you tonight, I hope we can all take some measure of comfort that whatever feelings of, lack that we have when we show up to IKAR on a Saturday morning, not sure what the prayers are, not sure how to sing them, not sure what they mean, not sure which way to hold the prayer book, you are not alone in feeling that way. And that's the exact reason that we decided to offer this class. This was something that we've heard for many, many years would be helpful, and I hope it will be. That's why we're offering it right now. So let me say a word as we get started this evening about what this class is and what it isn't. I want to try to do a little bit of expectation setting, which I tried to do in the writing of the little marketing blurb for this class. But let's all get off on the same page, and let me share a little bit about what I'm imagining we'll do with our time together. So this is first and foremost a class where I hope at the end of the series you will walk away knowing 8 to 10 of the core prayers from the Shabbat morning service. All right? By which I mean we're not looking at Friday night liturgy. We're not looking at weekday liturgy, although there is some crossover between weekday liturgy and Saturday morning liturgy. But the focus of this class will be 8 to 10 of the core prayers from the Shabbat morning service that you're going to experience 10 out of 10 times when you come to IKAR on a Saturday morning. So how are we going to learn these prayers? What will we learn? Part of the goal of this class is technical skill acquisition, by which I mean learning how to pronounce the words and sing the melodies we most often use. Because this is a technical skill building goal, it means practice, right? It means that we'll spend a good chunk of time each class practicing singing together, as well as we can sing together over Zoom, singing these prayers together and pronouncing the actual words of these prayers. I'm going to be teaching them slowly, and there's going to be a fair amount of repeat after me. Additional goal vis-a-vis these 8 to 10 prayers is to learn the basic meaning of these prayers. Now, let me try to be clear. This learning outcome does not include me teaching Hebrew decoding skills, right? By which I mean you will not learn how to read Hebrew in this class. If you are interested in learning how to read Hebrew, how to decode Hebrew letters, I want to recommend that you check out American Jewish University's Hebrew offerings. I just put a link here in the chat. And they even have an Intro to Prayerbook Hebrew class, in addition to modern Hebrew, biblical Hebrew. That's, I think, the best place I know to learn how to read the Hebrew language. That's not what we're going to be doing here. The good news is that you, I think, will be able to follow along whether or not you know how to read/decode Hebrew or not, because every time I share a prayer, I will share it both in Hebrew and in transliteration, which is the fancy word for Hebrew in English letters. Okay, so my hope is that you will learn how to sing in Hebrew, whether or not you know how to read Hebrew, okay? Also attached to this, learning the basic meaning of these prayers, right? So we're not going to be doing really any translation work, but we will look at the translations of these prayers to understand what we're saying. Okay, so I'm not going to teach you this word means that and that word means this, but rather we'll look at these prayers in translation as well, so we have a sense of what we're saying. Okay. The second learning goal of this series is that I hope that you'll walk away with a sense of the basic structure, choreography, and themes of the Shabbat morning service. For example, what is the arc of the experience? What's the design logic and the artistry that went into the construction of the Siddur, of the prayer book? But here, let me also say what this class is not, which is a space where we're going to do a whole lot of discussing the theological the theological questions around prayer, right? Which is a very worthy conversation and a very important goal, but not one that I've attached to this class. Okay, so we're not going to spend time talking about who are we praying to, and does God listen, and what does it mean for God to respond to prayer or not to respond to prayer. Again, fascinating questions. Maybe I'll offer that as a part 2, but too much for one class where the primary goals are about technical skill building and gaining the skills that you need to show up at IKAR on Saturday morning and participate to a greater degree and walk away with a better sense of what it is that you are participating in. Okay, so similarly, it's not a class where we will deeply investigate the history of the Siddur, but I will always try to, share with you where a particular prayer comes from as we're about to learn it. Okay, give me a thumbs up if that was clear. If you thought that this was Econ 101 and you're in the wrong place, now is the right time to walk out of the professor's room. No offense is taken. In all seriousness, if what I just described is a different class than what you were hoping for, you are under no obligation to stay for our time this evening, although maybe you'll try it out and be pleasantly surprised. And certainly folks can email me, Rabbi Panitz, I'm going to put this into the chat, at IKAR.org at any point, both telling me what you want to learn in this class, in future classes, or of course, any feedback from this class. Okay, so we're a big group, 56 participants in total, which means that full group participation is challenging. So we're not going to do a whole lot of 56-person full group discussions. I am going to send folks into breakout rooms a little bit later. But I still would love for this to be as responsive and non-exclusively frontal as possible. So I want to encourage you to use the chat as a way of asking questions, and I will do my best to keep my eyes in 3 places at once, on you, on the chat, and on my lesson plan. Okay. Where can we access the recordings? I assume you mean the recordings to this class. So we will, just like Ivy, our clergy assistant, sent out an email you should have all received just maybe yesterday, I think, with a reminder about this class. She will always send both a reminder about the upcoming class and a recording of the past class. So you have a way of reviewing it or accessing it once again. Do you need a notebook for notes? You are encouraged to take as many or as few notes as you find helpful for the benefit of your learning and retention. I am going to talk in just a few minutes about different Siddurim, different prayer books that are out there, just to give you a small sampling, not a comprehensive sampling, but a small sampling of what different prayer books look like and some of the pros and cons of the different prayer books out there on the market. You do not need, however, a prayer book. You didn't have to bring a prayer book to this class to follow along. I'm going to share my screen. That being said, if you have a prayer book, I'm going to say something that not all rabbis will say. Write in you are invited and encouraged to write in your prayer book. Some of you might feel more comfortable doing that with sticky notes or something that gets posted in there. Some of you will feel comfortable just writing directly onto the page, but I'd like to make the claim that the prayer book be modified as much or as little as needed in order for you to get the most out of it when you're using it. So if that means writing notes in there, you most certainly can. Okay, I'm gonna hold off on prayer book questions for now, and I'll talk about prayer books when we get to that point in maybe 15 minutes or so. Okay, let's start with the question, what is the Siddur and what's in the Siddur? So the first thing I want to say, and by the way, this opening class will have a little bit more of the framing and history than future classes, but I think it's important so that we're all on the same page about the content that we're going to be learning. So the first thing to say is that some people imagine that the prayer book the Siddur, which is the Hebrew word for prayer book, was given to Moses at Mount Sinai, just like tradition teaches that the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, was given to Moses at Mount Sinai. While there is a legitimate debate amongst the different denominations and Jews of all persuasions about the divine status of the Torah, there is no legitimate debate that can claim as a starting point that the Siddur, that the prayer book, was given to Moses at Mount Sinai. That's just what my grandmother would call Baba Misa. Okay, that's not true. That's a myth. Okay, the Siddur, the prayer book, is a construction of human creativity that was developed over many centuries of Jews trying to figure out what it means to be in conversation with the divine. And many prayers are the human response to that feeling of, how do I speak to God? How do I listen to God? And prayers are written out of that creative impulse. We, furthermore, did not always have a Siddur. And let me say something maybe even more shocking. We did not always have liturgical prayer. Prayer itself, I think, is as old as the human soul. Right? As long as there is life, there is some innate desire to express ourselves in some transcendent way, right? To be in communication with something greater than ourselves. But liturgical prayer, right? By which I mean prayers that are written down, are collected in a book, that are recited X number of times a day, X number of days a week, and so forth, is a post-temple innovation. Here's what I mean. 2,000 years ago, there was a temple that stood in Jerusalem. In Hebrew, it was known as Beit HaMikdash, which was the focal point of Jewish ritual and cultic and communal life. Jews made pilgrimage to the temple at least 3 times a year on Passover, Sukkot, and Shavuot, also known as the 3 pilgrimage festivals, to offer sacrifices. There were atonement sacrifices, gratitude sacrifices, wholeness, peace offerings, animals and grain and libations and so forth. And 2,000 years ago and prior, that was the method by which Jews communicated with the divine. It was through sacrifices at the sanctioned site of the temple. There was no liturgical prayer in the temple era. Now, that's probably an oversimplification. There were probably various psalms or songs that were recited by the Levites as part of the temple service, but there was no, gathering with 10 Jews in the morning to say X, Y, and Z prayers until the destruction of the Second Temple around the year 70 of the Common Era. Right? The destruction of the temple creates a real crisis, a real rupture in Jewish life for a variety of reasons. But most relevant here is that we no longer have a place to offer sacrifices. By extension, we no longer have a sanctioned method of communicating the wide range of things that we'd want to communicate with God. And so the rabbis of the first few centuries of the Common Era need to come up with a new system by which we can essentially replace the sacrificial system, by which we can communicate with God. And so the rabbis innovate liturgical prayer. Just as there was a daily sacrifice offered 3 times a day, the rabbis institute a prayer service 3 times a day, known as the morning service, the afternoon service, and the evening service, corresponding with the 3 times that sacrifices were given. Now, the creation of liturgical prayer and what prayers are required to be recited on a daily basis is the topic of much discussion in early rabbinic literature, also known as the Mishnah and Gemara, or the Talmud for short. But there is no record of an actual prayer book until, you can put your guess into the chat, the 9th century. That is many, many, many centuries after Moses supposedly spoke with God at Mount Sinai. Okay, not until the 9th century of the Common Era do we have something called the Sidur of Rav Amram, who's a particular rabbi, who most likely, scholars are divided about this, but most likely in response to the birth of Islam and some increased threats to Jewish stability in the lands that Jews were living in. There's the compulsion. Let's write these prayers down. If we don't write them down, they might be lost to history. And with Jews now living in more distinct places than they ever were, let's try to formulate one common order of our prayers that can then be recited as a Jew wherever you go. The Hebrew word sidur is related to another Hebrew word that you know from Passover, seder, right? Can you hear the similarities? Sidur, seder. And what both of those words mean is essentially order, right? So what a sidur is the ordering of fixed liturgy that is then to be recited in a prescribed way. Just like the Passover Seder is a prescribed order of how you move through the choreography of Passover evening, right? First you bless the wine, then you wash your hands, then you tell the story, then you eat the matzah, etc., right? So a sidur is the order of our prayers. Okay. To quickly answer Michael Bernstein's question in the chat, was there ritual language that accompanied the sacrifices back then? The short answer is yes, but the majority of that language was to only be recited by the priests who actually offered the sacrifice. So one of the additional innovations of the rabbis in the wake of the destruction of the Second Temple is what's sometimes referred to as the democratization of Jewish ritual. Right? It's now not only the priests or the Levites who are obligated to do X, Y, and Z, it's now everyone. Right? Everyone is now responsible for a thrice daily prayer service, not just the priests who are obligated to thrice daily sacrifices. There's much more to say about that, but that's the quick answer to that question. Okay, time to participate. So you can put your answers into the chat. We sometimes narrowly define prayer as asking God for things, right? There's the trite version of that. Please, God, can I have a brand new tricycle? Right? And then there's, of course, the much deeper, much more serious version of that, right? Please, God, bring healing to my loved one, right? But all of that is still a particular kind of prayer that we might call petitionary prayer, right? Asking for things. And I think in some religious traditions, petitionary prayer is almost synonymous with the word prayer, right? It's a pleading for something. But Jewish prayer and the prayer that you will find in the Siddur has a much more expansive definition. And so I want to ask you, right, maybe, think through some of the prayers that maybe you've heard over the years, or just intuitively, some of the prayers that you might think of as prayers. What are other kinds of prayers that you might find in the Siddur, in addition to prayers where we ask for things? Good. Praise, gratitude, dialogue, interesting, recognition, honor, remembrance, praying for strength and acceptance, affirming belief, to exalt, to worship, prayer as instruction, prayer, wow, you guys are fast, prayer as gratitude and admiration, acknowledgement of God's strength and mercy, prayers of atonement, prayer might be directions on how to live, food and wine, right? Certainly we have blessings that accompany eating or drinking. Praise, poetry, the Shema, thank you, absolution, forgiveness, acknowledgement of relationship, calling for attention. Oh, right. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So you all have really, I think, named the primary categories, but let me just try to present this to you in a somewhat systematic way, right? So certainly we have petitionary prayers. We have prayers of praise, right? Praised are you, Lord our God, who fill in the blank, right? Who does this, who does that, who is this, who is that. Right? We have prayers of gratitude, right? Thank you, God, for giving me this, for protecting us, for et cetera, et cetera. A big category of prayers, maybe the primary category of prayers, which I think is a little bit hard to define with just one English word like praise or gratitude, is blessings. Right? I would say actually that the majority of the prayers that you encounter in the Siddur are structured as a blessing, which might mean opening words of blessing, some paragraph expressing a belief or a theological maxim or a creed or a hope or whatever it might be, with a closing blessing. But oftentimes these prayers are signaled by the classic words of blessing, Baruch atah, blessed are you, fill in the blank. Right? Sometimes God's name, sometimes not God's name. We'll look at some of those later today. But then we have prayers, which it's almost funny to use the word prayer, right? Prayers which are recitation of core memories, right? An articulation of collective history, right? In the prayer book is the passage from the Torah, which tells us from Genesis that God rested on the seventh day. It's sort of unusual to call that a prayer, but it is. It's a prayer in our Siddur that we recite as part of the Shabbat service, right? So we might ask right now just the question without the answer, in what way is that text functioning as a prayer versus how it might function when you read it in Genesis as part of the Torah reading, right? Or we might have prayers that recall our Exodus from Egypt. So what is going on there, right? Are we reminding ourselves of something? Are we rerouting in our collective narrative? Are we reminding God of something? Right? Is there an educational purpose? Right? If you are gathering 3 times a day traditionally as a community, and this is before the printing press, and this is a moment to remind everyone who's gathered what the core principles are of your community, what might you say? Right? You might retell some of the core stories. You might recall some of the guiding values of our tradition. Okay, so reminders to self, reminders to God, creedal statements, this is what we believe, action statements, this is how we should behave, some aimed at ourself, some aimed at God, recitation of core memories. Those are some of the genres of prayers that you might find. Another 5 minutes or so of intro, and then I promise we'll get into some of the actual prayers that we sing on a weekly basis. Where do the words come from? Where do the words come from that are found in our Siddur? Right, so the words of the Siddur are sourced from a variety of places. Okay, some of the words, some of the prayers are biblical quotations, ranging in size from a single line, right? Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Where do those words come from? Deuteronomy. It is a direct quotation of something that we read in the Torah, that we encounter for the first time in the Torah. I gave the example before, right? Vishamru b'nei Israel, right? And God completed God's work of creating and rested on the seventh day. And then even more common are Psalms, right? Either in their entirety or excerpts of Psalms, right? That are, again, located initially in the Bible, but then selectively included in the Siddur, right? And woven into the prayer service. Then we have some words in the Siddur that are medieval poetry, right? There's a real outburst of liturgical creativity, much of it coming from, Al-Andalusia, the Golden Age, Spain, and some prayers that are the product of medieval poetry that you might know are Ein Kelohenu, which is the song prayer that we conclude our service with at IKAR, right? In Hebrew and then in Ladino. Adon Olam, which 99% of other synagogues close their services with. Those are medieval selections of medieval poetry that then get added to the Siddur, right? That are, by the way, not in that original Siddur that I mentioned from the 9th century from Rav Amram. We have long passages of prose that are composed anywhere between the 4th and the 12th century. The Aleinu is one of those. Nishmat Kol Chai. If you're not exactly sure what I'm referencing, don't worry. We're going to cover these prayers in later classes, right? But the point being, these are passages that are written that are not directly quoting the Bible. And then, of course, we have, blessings, which are composed specifically for the prayer book. These deal with various themes, right? Deliverance, the sanctity of time, the rebuilding of Jerusalem. And as I said before, these are often signaled by the Baruch Atah formulation. And then it's only fair to say that where do the words come from? There are words that are still being composed, right? If you got your hands on a Siddur prior to 1948 and certain Siddurim post 1948, you're going to see in real time the composition of new liturgy, right? And of course, additional markers. If you looked at a Siddur in the United Kingdom, you would see a different prayer for our country than the one that you see in the Siddur published in the United States that we use. right? And so there are always new prayers being composed as well. What makes it into the Siddur then has everything to do with the editors and the publishers and the particular, priorities and biases of those who are putting new Siddurim together. Okay, speaking of Siddurim, I want to show you examples of just a few. So I'm going to share my screen, and you'll give me a thumbs up that it's working. Wait, sorry, I did the wrong thing. One more time. I want to share my screen. Okay. Okay. Will you give me a thumbs up? Do you see a PDF in front of you? Okay, excellent. So you are looking right now at page 122 from Siddur Lev Shalem. This is the prayer book that we use at IKAR on Saturday mornings. This is a publication of the Rabbinical Assembly, which is the conservative movement union of rabbis. So this is, often referred to as the conservative movement Siddur. So, just to give you a sense, it has the prayers in Hebrew and the direct translation of those prayers in English on the right, in the middle of the page. And then around the perimeter of the page, it has some commentary, which is directly stemming from particular words or phrases in the Hebrew, and some commentary that's here on the right-hand side of the page, and some commentary that are, I would call, sort of broader reflections or meditations on the themes of prayer, right? That are either specifically connected to this particular prayer or are just, something good to think about while you're praying. Okay, this is Siddur Lev Shalem. Let me show you a different option. Okay, so does everyone now see a different text? Give me a thumbs up if you're now seeing. Okay, great. So what you are looking at now is Siddur 8 Ratzon. This is not affiliated with a particular movement. It's published by Shiviti Publications. And the reason I wanted you to see this particular prayer book is because it is the only prayer book that I know of, although I am happy to be corrected, that has full transliteration, right? You can see on the right-hand side of the page is the Hebrew. On the left-hand side of the page is the Hebrew and English letters. So this is one side of the page. This is Baruch She'amar. This is a particular prayer, right? And on the other side of the page is the translation of that prayer. And just like we saw in Lev Shalem, some commentary, right? That both help you understand the prayer in a little bit of a deeper fashion, and maybe that guide you, kavanot, intentions, that guide you as a way to spiritually connect with the prayer. All right, very quickly, what you're looking at right now is the Koren Siddur. This is a modern Orthodox Siddur, oftentimes connected to Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. This is one side of the page. The other side of the page looks as follows. Those who like this Siddur tend to say that it is a davening-friendly Siddur, by which they mean, the text is really formatted in a way which maintains the congruence of the prayer, right? So you're not going to have sort of awkward page turns in the middle of the prayer. They try to group the prayers and font the prayers in a way which makes it easiest to sing along. But it is a Siddur, I would say, with much less explanation or commentary than the two others that I showed you. I'm going to show you one more. And of course, please remember, this is a very brief sampling. It is not intended to be comprehensive. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a sense of what's out there. And maybe I'll bring additional ones each class so you can see even more. But this is a very interesting Siddur. This particular Siddur is Art Scroll, an Art Scroll Siddur. I'm also affiliated with the Orthodox denomination. This one is, it's called the Schottenstein edition. But what I wanted you to see is what's called interlinear translation. So do you notice how under every Hebrew word is the direct English translation of that word? Baruch, blessed is. She'amar, he who spoke. V'haya ha'olam, and the world came into being. Every page of this Siddur looks like this. So the downside of this Siddur is that it's not necessarily so davening friendly, right? There's a lot going on that might, quote unquote, distract the eye. However, it's an incredible resource for those who want to learn a direct translation of what they're saying. And maybe this Siddur, better than all the others, aids in the project of learning particular words and their particular meanings, right? Because if you looked at this one or any of the others we saw, okay, you see what the first sentence means, and then you see the translation is blessed he who spoke and the world came into being, but you don't necessarily know which of these Hebrew words means the world. Okay, let me stop the share. I see that we have a couple of comments, so forgive me, let me just go through the chat for a moment and see what you have. Okay, forgive me. I didn't see your comments asking me to make it larger. I will send this PDF to all of you after the class as well. Okay, so just in order of what I showed you, Lev Shalem. This is the Siddur that we use at IKAR, conservative movement. The second one with transliteration is called Siddur Et Ratzon. Although I see from the chat here that the Reform Prayer Book Mishkan Tefillah has a full transliteration edition, which is wonderful to know. Thank you, Michael. The third is the Koren Siddur. This is the pocket size, but it comes in lots of different sizes. And then the fourth that I showed you in the PDF was the interlinear translation Art Scroll Siddur. Okay. Yes, I'm happy to put together a bibliography at the end of the class. Okay. Any, I will ask nervously, any questions that need to be answered before we move on? Mindful that we're sharing a Zoom room with 60 others. So don't ask me what lottery numbers to pick. Okay. All right. How respectful. All right. So a little bit more what's going on, but we're now going to get into the Shabbat morning service. Okay. So just to give you a trajectory for the 45 minutes, the next 45 minutes, I'm going to give you a brief sense of what is the arc of the whole Shabbat morning service. And then we're going to dive into one particular section of the service, looking at the structure of it. And then we're going to learn 2 prayers with a nod towards a third. And then we'll close. Okay? All right, so let me, okay. Let me share my screen once again. There should be a way I can still see the chat, right? Well, yeah, I just need to press chat. Okay. Okay, just give me a thumbs up. Do you see the diagram in front of you? Okay. So this diagram comes from an incredible book. I'll put it in the bibliography. Don't worry, folks. It is a 10-volume book called My People's Prayer Book, edited by Rabbi Lawrence Hoffman. Each volume of this book deals with a different section of the service. So this is a whole book just about the Shema and its blessings. We have a whole nother book just about what's called Psukei de Zimra, which is about 6 or 7 prayers that we recite on a weekday morning, and 8 other volumes as well. The book, the majority of each volume is a deep dive into each prayer that is part of the service, and then 8 different commentaries about that particular prayer, one from a historical perspective, one from a theological perspective, one from a feminist perspective, a Hasidic perspective, Talmudic perspective, Hasidic perspective, and the list goes on. All right. It's an incredible resource. You could spend years just studying this book and its various volumes. I'm going to try to take from this book what is relevant to our classes. One of the tremendous resources of this book is that the first chapter of each volume does a little bit of charting of, how does this part of the service fit into the full service. So I want to walk you through, I don't want to overwhelm you. Let me make this as big as possible. There are a lot of words here. I'm just going to focus on a couple. Does everyone see the boxes in the middle of the document? I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it goes up this way, a crescendo up to Torah, and then down to conclusion. Give me a thumbs up if you're tracking what I'm saying. Okay, let me try to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, this is the arc of a Saturday morning service. A Saturday morning service starts with what's called Birkot HaShachar, opening blessings, moves into a part of the service called Pesukei de Zimra, verses of song, which moves into the Shema and its blessings, followed by the Amidah. That's the standing prayer. At IKAR, we typically do the first 3 pages together, followed by a few minutes of silent prayer. You see that's next. Right, from there we go to the Torah service, where there are prayers that accompany the opening of the ark, that accompany the taking of the Torah out of the ark, that accompany the parading of the Torah around the sanctuary. We then read from the Torah, and then there are prayers that accompany the returning of the Torah to the ark. Oops, sorry. Then you see there's this little arrow. On Shabbat, we have an additional service called Musaf, which has another Amidah, another standing prayer with silent prayer. And then the conclusion, which is Ein Keloheinu, Mourner's Kaddish, Aleinu. Okay. The point of showing you this chart right now is just to give you the most basic sense that there are differentiated units of prayer that put together constitute the Saturday morning prayer. So what might feel like an undifferentiated mass of Hebrew is a mass of Hebrew, but it's not undifferentiated, right? There are distinct units, each of which have their own crescendo and decrescendo, which all have their distinct themes that they are exploring, when put together, constitute the full service. So my hope is that at the end of the class, at the end of our 5 sessions together, you'll have a better sense for what is the trajectory of the service as a whole. But for now, I want you to just see, right, that there are these different units of prayer that make up the Saturday morning service. We are going to focus this evening, on the part of the service called Psukei de Zimra. Now, you might say, but Rabbi Panitz, why did you skip box number 1? The reason I skipped box number 1 is because at IKAR, we don't do box number 1. If you show up at IKAR at 9:30 a.m., what you'll find is the rabbis in Hillel still kibitzing. But then by 9:34 a.m., what you'll find is the first prayer of Pesukei de Zimra, not any of the prayers of Birkot HaShachar. The prayers of Birkot HaShachar, this is not unique to IKAR. Many synagogues assume that the prayers known as Birkot HaShachar happen at home, privately, before congregants arrive at synagogue at 9:30 a.m., because of course, all congregants arrive on time at 9:30 a.m. when we get started with Pesukei de Zimra. So what is in Pesukei de Zimra? The first prayer is what's known as Baruch She'amar. We're going to look very carefully at that prayer today. You then have, isn't that elegant? An added material, biblical interlude number 1. We don't, I'm going to focus on one of the prayers that we do after Baruch She'amar. That's in the section called biblical interlude number 1. Then we have what's called daily Hallel, which are Psalms 145 to Psalm 150, one psalm after the next. By the way, there are 150 psalms in the whole book of Psalms. So what we are doing in Pesukei de Zimra in this section of the service is every morning we finish the book of Psalms, right? It's like going to your favorite book every morning and just reading the last chapter of the book and then saying, look, I read the book again. Right? Like reading the best conclusion of the book. Some added material, once again, selections from different biblical sources. And then Pesukei de Zimra ends with a prayer known as Yishtabach. Okay? Again, right now, I'm just giving you the broad contours of this. I will send you this packet as well. But this is the prayer structure of Pesukei de Zimra. Now, let me say a word about the meaning of this part of the service. I think the best way to describe Pesukei de Zimra, which means Pesukei is like the Hebrew word pasuk, which is the Hebrew word for a verse, right? It could be a verse of the Siddur. It could be, that's the same word we use for a biblical verse, right? In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That is the first pasuk of the Torah. So, and Zimra, which is also a beautiful name, and people are given that name. My cousin has that name. Zimra means song. So Pesukei de Zimra, the first service within the Shabbat morning liturgy, it is called verses of song. And the best way to describe what's going on here is the prayer before the prayer. This is a kind of a warm-up for the morning service. It gets added into the Siddur later than the next section, which, if you recall, is the Shema and its blessings. It is a later addition to the Siddur, which I think emerges from the recognition that you can't just drop into the most important moments of prayer and be spiritually ready, right? Just like a pianist will warm up with scales and then maybe play one or two favorite songs that they know like the back of their hand before they perform Beethoven's Ninth at Carnegie, right? So too, we have a kind of a spiritual warm-up that is an acknowledgement that prayerfulness cannot be summoned on demand, right? You have to build up towards it, right? So these are songs that are supposed to be musical, that are supposed to get us in the spirit of what we're doing, that are the sort of warm up for ourselves and the opening act of our prayerful experience. There is a teaching that is very old. It's attributed to the Mishnah, which means it is probably it is developed around the time that the rabbis are pivoting from the sacrificial system to liturgical prayer. It says that the pious ones of old used to tarry an hour and then pray so as to focus themselves on God, right? So likely what that means is that the really righteous ones would meditate for an hour before they actually opened their mouth to begin with the Shema and the blessings around the Shema. That idea then got concretized into this fixed liturgy, which we now know as Psukei de Zimra. Okay. Again, the communal service, it used to start with Barchu, also known as the call to prayer, right? A call to prayer is a logical way to start a service. But Psukei de Zimra, these verses of song, got grafted to the opening part of the service in order to help us be more prepared for Barchu, for the actual call to prayer, and then the intensity of the Shema and the Amidah that follows. And in later classes, we'll talk about, why is it that the Shema and the Amidah are considered the climax of the service? Okay, are you ready to sing? Okay. Now that I've done all this talking and my voice is hoarse. Okay, so here's what I'd like to do. We're going to start with the very first prayer that we sing at IKAR, which is a prayer known as Baruch She'amar. One of the beautiful and inspiring things about IKAR that is also a challenging thing about IKAR that also makes this class a little bit more challenging is that we don't always use the same melodies for the same prayers. There are certain prayers that we always sing to the same melody, right? Anytime someone is holding the Torah, right, about to lead us in the call and response, Shema Yisrael, often it's a B'nai Mitzvah kid up there, it's always the same melody, right? So some of the melodies are the same from week to week. Some of the melodies differ from week to week. I'm going to try to teach you the melodies that we sing every week and or the melodies that Hillel chooses more often than not. But I'm sure what'll happen is I'll teach you Baruch She'amar and then you'll show up the Shabbos and Hillel will use a different melody. But I'm going to use the one that I've, in my, 11 years going to IKAR, I've heard him use more than any other melody, okay? And like many of Hillel's melodies, this is, I don't know, like probably some Uzbeki melody that he discovered, I don't even know how. Okay, so here's how we're going to do it. There's really no great way for us to all sing in unison over Zoom. Or I should say the best way for us to sing in unison over Zoom is for you to keep your microphones muted. That's probably the best way to say it. It's not because I don't want to hear your voices. It's just really hard to focus when there's a slight delay and 60 voices responding at the same time. But I think you'll tell me if this works or not. I think it won't be that hard for you to sing with me, right? For you to sync up your voice with my voice. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have the screen shared. I'm going to have the Hebrew and the English transliteration up. I'm going to sing one line, and then I'm going to repeat that line, and you're going to try to sing with me when I'm repeating that line. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so Let me get the translit up. Let me try to get everything up. Okay, let's see. Share my screen. Okay. Do you see on the right side of the page, the screen, the Hebrew, and on the left side of the page, the translit? Oh my gosh, it's a miracle. Okay. All right, so use whichever part of the screen you want. All right, you ready? Here's the melody that he most often uses. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam yutrai. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Again. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam yutrai. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Baruch oseh Vireshit. Baruch Oseh Vireshit. But Rabbi, you skipped 2 words. Yes. So some of the melodies use all of the words, and some of the melodies selectively use the words, and there's no like coherent principle that I can give you that helps you know what words we use and what words we don't use. I once asked Hillel this question, and he said, "Oh, I just whatever words fit the melody the best, that's what I do." So it's okay in this case. He's leaving out the words Baruch Hu, which is, blessed is the one who spoke, and there was the world. He's skipping blessed is God. And there's plenty of that in here, so don't worry about it. Okay? From the top. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Baruch oseh v'reshit. Baruch oseh v'reshit. Baruch omer ve'oseh. Okay, you try. Baruch omer ve'oseh. Baruch gozer umekayim. You try. Baruch gozer umekayim. Again. Baruch omer ve'oseh. Baruch omer ve'oseh. Baruch gozer umekayim. Baruch gozer umekayim. Baruch merachem al haaretz. Baruch merachem al haaretz. Baruch merachem al habriot. Baruch merachem al habriot. Musically, it's part 1. Right, the first 2 stanzas are part 1. The next 2 are part 2, and then back to part 1. Right, so na 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 na. We're doing that again for Baruch merachem al haaretz. Baruch merachem al habriot. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Baruch oseh v'reshit. Do you hear the musical parallel? Okay. This is an experiment. Is this working? Are you with me? Some yeses, some non-responses, which I'll take as no. Okay. All right. Let's try to sing together the first 4 lines, right, through Mikayim, okay, if you're following on the English transliteration, okay? So no repeat after me, let's just do it together, okay? Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Baruch oseh v'reshit. Baruch Omer Ve'oseh, Baruch Gozer Umekayim, Baruch Merachem Al Habriot, Baruch Meshalem Sachar Tov Lireaf. Oh, sorry, I went past where we were supposed to go. Okay, sorry, I went ahead. Okay. Baruch Merachem Al Habriot. New line. Baruch Meshalem Sachar Tov Lireaf. You try. Baruch Meshalem Sachar Tov Lireaf. Baruch La'ad Vikayam Lanetzach. You try. Baruch La'ad Vikayam Lanetzach. Baruch Podeu Matzil. You try. Baruch Podeu Matzil. Okay, the English is now not right here, or I'll make it right. Baruch Shemo. Baruch Shemo. Okay, and then we do Yainai. So just listen to the Yainai. Yainai, Yainai. Yainai, you try. Yainai, Yainai, part 2. Yainai, you try. Part 1. Okay. I'm looking at your chat comments here. I can send a recording, or maybe I can even get Hillel to record a recording to send you all in part of the follow-up email. I don't have a musical score, though, that can be followed along. I'll ask Hillel if he has one, but not that I'm aware of. So do I bring a transliteration with me to IKAR if I can't read Hebrew? No need, because what you're looking at here on the left side of your screen is a little blue transliteration book that that is available when you enter the sanctuary at Shalhavet. Okay. Should we try to sing this all together? Okay. I chose not the easiest melody for us to start out with. The next one that I teach, I promise, later tonight, is way more repetitive and easier and less Uzbeki. Okay. Ready to sing with me? We're on the top of the page. Baruch She'amar. Okay. Me. Ready? Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam. Baruch Oseh v'reshit. Again. Baruch Omer ve'oseh. Baruch Gozer Umekayim. Go high. Baruch Merachem Al Haaretz. Baruch Merachem Al Habriot. Baruch Meshalem Sachar Tov Lireaf. Baruch La'ad Vikayam Lanetzach. Baruch Podeu Matzil. Baruch Shemo. I think I might have taught it wrong the first time. I think I might have gone up high too early the first time. So it's the first 4 stanzas are low, the next 4 are high, and then the last 2 are low. Let's do it one more time. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Baruch oseh v'reshit stay low. Baruch omer ve'oseh. Baruch gozer umekayim. Hi. Baruch merachem al haaretz. Baruch merachem al habriot. Baruch mishalem sachar tov lire'av. Baruch ha'la'ad v'kayam lanetzach lo. Baruch podehu matzil. Baruch Baruch Shemo. Yana na na yana na 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 na. Yana na 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 yana na na. Yana na 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 yana na na na. Yana na 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 yana na na na. Yanai na 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 na, yai na 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 na, yai na 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 na, ya na 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 na. Are we for sure gonna show up at 9:30 a.m. this Saturday and then leave at 9:35 when you've done the one prayer you know? But you know one? Are we feeling good about this? Okay. Here's what I'd like to do. We're going to spend a little bit of time, 10 minutes in breakout rooms, talking about the meaning of the prayer that we just learned. Let me see if this works. What happens if you click on the link I just put in the chat? Do you get the PDF to the Lev Shalem? Yes? I don't know why it has that whole Chrome extension part on the first hand. Just click on the, okay, wait, so, okay, give me one. Let me try again. How about now? Did that work? Okay, great, great. So here's what we're gonna do. I want you to read the English of the prayer. And here is a strategy for making sense of prayers. I learned this from Rabbi Elliot Dorff, who taught a prayer class in rabbinical school. He says that we often jump to the question, what does this prayer mean to me? Without first asking two important questions that might help us crack open the meaning of the prayer first, before we get to question number 3, what does it mean to me? So here in the chat, there's an imaginative first question. And this isn't about getting it right. It's about getting into the heart and mind and soul of the person who composed this prayer, because someone composed this prayer. Someone had an experience of the world, of the divine, of themselves, that caused them to sit down with quill and pad and write this down. So what was the experience that leads someone to write, "Blessed is the one who spoke and created the world. Blessed is the one who is compassionate on the earth. Blessed is the one who is compassionate for all of God's creatures," right? So that's question number 1. Question number 2, why the God language? What happens to the prayer when it is framed with divine terminology? Right? Whether you believe in God, you don't believe in God, how does the prayer change by virtue of inclusion of God language? And then what does it mean to you? Okay, you're going to read the prayer together in English and then ask these 3 questions of each other, and then come back and I will teach you one more song. One more prayer. I'm gonna just automatically create these breakout rooms, and I will see you in 8 minutes. Page 122. Did you accidentally leave the room? The rooms are closing in 30 seconds, so yeah. Welcome back. Welcome back. Another 20 seconds, everyone will be here. Okay, how was that for not enough time to do that assignment? Yeah, okay, great. At least we're on the same page about that. Um, let's hear from three people. Anything that you noticed about this prayer that maybe you had never noticed before could be connected to what was the experience that the author had, could be connected to the God language, could be a meaning you found, could be just something you noticed about the verbs or the language. Let's hear three answers. Matthew, yeah. Just turn your mic on and so we can all hear you.
Yeah, I mentioned how there seems to be an escalation here. It really just builds one idea after another, and it just seems to get greater and greater and greater in this sense of awe.
Beautiful. Great. Great. So there's a sense of in an installation or a building of what we're blessing. Yeah. Yeah. Others.
I noticed the sincerity. It really sounded like it was from an individual voice. I could tell one person wrote it. It didn't seem like a compilation. I mean, who knows? But it really felt really sincere from an individual, which I was touched by.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
I liked what Jeremy said was talked about in our group about just sort of the idea of one, the whole idea one is always referred as one, that the oneness, and that I thought that sort of captured the spirit.
Beautiful. Just reflections. We really give that's enough time to really sort of dig into the meaning of this prayer. But something that I'll just draw your attention to is the tense of the verbs. With the exception of the first. You all hear me?
There's something wrong with your audio, I think. I don't know. It was a little weird.
What about now?
A bit underwater.
You sound like you're underwater. You sound like you're underwater.
Still?
Maybe he is underwater.
It did the unmute trick. Did that help? No. I'm not using AirPods. I don't think anything's wrong with my voice suddenly.
I just love that all of the jazz hands at once, the gallery view of the IKAR jazz hands, as we were like, not so much. We don't really hear you. It was just a lot of jazz hands. I loved it. We hear you now? Oh, no.
If you click the little caret next to the microphone on your Zoom thing and just check what your audio input output is, that's what usually I've run into.
Did this help? Yeah? All right. Thank you, Aviva. Aviva for the win.
2 years of Zoom teaching teaches you a lot.
Okay. So what I was just quickly saying is one thing to notice is the verbs in this prayer, with the exception of the first one, right? Blessed is God who spoke and the world was created. That's a past tense verb, referencing, I think, quite clearly, explicitly, the fact that the creation, right? The creation story in the beginning of Genesis, God speaks each day's creation into being, right? God said, let there be light, and there was light. God said, let the trees sprout from the earth, and the trees sprouted from the earth. So with the exception of that one verb, everything else is in the present tense. Blessed is God who who is compassionate, right? Who is actively compassionate for the earth. Blessed is God who is compassionate for all of creation. Blessed is God who makes creation, right? Not a one-time thing, but an ongoing process. That's one thing I want you to notice about this particular prayer. And then the other thing to notice, I think, is, this is the opening prayer, and just to some degree, the spiritual audacity. We are blessing God. That's what's happening in this prayer. We're not asking God to bless us, right? It feels like the first moment of prayer, right? The opening prayer of our service is an attempt to maybe reorient ourselves away from the egocentricity that might dominate our lives too often, where we think that we are the ones who are making everything happen. And the first orientation or reorientation of prayer is to say, I'm not God. Someone else is God. You're God, right? The one who creates the world, the one who is abundantly compassionate, right? The one whose power of speech is beyond what I can do through my power of speech. That's God, right? So just notice, right, that's the opening chess move, right? That's pawn to e4 in Psuke de Zimra. That's how we begin this process. It's blessing God, right? A little different from maybe how you would imagine prayer normally formulated. Okay, I'm going to go 6 minutes late, and I'm going to teach you one more song because I think you deserve it. So the next prayer that we jump to in Psuke de Zimra is a full 10 pages later. If you remember in the little chart, this is the biblical interlude number 1. And if you, next time you have your Siddur open, just take a look at what's on page 123 and 124 and 125 and all of the in-between pages. But we skip 100% of the time from Baruch She'amar to a prayer known as Ki Leolam Chasto. This is on page 132 of the Siddur. And let me just bring it up in the various ways that you want to see it. So that's that and that. Okay, let me do this. Okay, thumbs up. Do you see it? Okay. This is one where we almost always do the same melody, and it's a simpler melody, and it's even can be sung as a call and response with the same refrain over and over again. So I think this one will be easier to learn. And you could just sing the refrain, or you could be a baller and learn every word like I'm about to teach you, okay? So let's just repeat after me the refrain. Let's start there. Ki, le'olam, chasto. That means, for God's love endures forever. That's the refrain of this rock ballad God love song that we're singing at 9:36 a.m. on Saturday mornings. Okay? I'm going to just sing the melody first without the words, and then we'll add the words. Okay? So I'll sing it, and then you'll repeat. Na 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 na. Ya na 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 ya na 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 ya na 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 na. That's the whole thing. You try. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Ya na 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 ya na 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 na. Ya na na na. I'll break it down into smaller chunks. Ya na 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 na. You try. Ya na 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 na. Ya na na, you try. Ya na na, me. Ya na, ya na, you try. Ya na ya na, ya na, you try. Ya na. A little easier? Yeah? Okay. We're going to add some words, but that's the melody. That's the whole melody. And again, it's done like in couplets. Okay? Repeat after me. Hodu ladonai ki tov, you try. Hodu ladonai ki tov, refrain. Ki ve'olam chasto, you try. Ki ve'olam chasto. Let's do that whole first together, right? Or repeat after me. Hodu ladonai ki tov, ki ve'olam chasto. Hodu ladonai ki tov, ki ve'olam chasto. Now we're going to move to the second line, okay? Hodu le'Elohei ha'Elohim, ki ve'olam chasto. You try. Hodu le'Elohei ha'Elohim, ki ve'olam chasto. Let's do that whole first couplet. Sing with me. Hodu ladonai ki tov, ki ve'olam chasto. Hodu le'Elohei ha'Elohim, ki ve'olam chasto. Next one. Hodu ladonai ha'adonim, ki ve'olam chasto. Let's try that. Hodu ladonai ha'adonim, ki ve'olam chasto. Now it's a lot of words to fit into the same melody. Le'oseh niflaot gedolot levado, ki ve'olam chasto. Le'oseh niflaot gedolot levado, ki ve'olam chasto. From the top, sing with me. Hodu ladonai ki tov, ki ve'olam chasto. Hodu le'Elohei ha'Elohim, ki ve'olam chasto. Same melody, next line. Hodu ladonai ha'adonim, ki ve'olam chasto. Le'oseh niflaot gedolot levado, ki ve'olam chasto. Next line. Le'oseh hashamayim bitfuna, ki ve'olam chasto. Le'roka ha'aretz al hamayim, ki ve'olam chasto. The challenge of this song is just learning all of the Hebrew. Right? The melody is really repetitive and not that complex because it's A, B, A, B, A, B. It's got the same melodic repetition. It's just lots of Hebrew words to insert into each new couplet. But again, we have the transliteration available to you on Shabbat morning. And so, that would be my recommendation if following along with the Hebrew is a little bit harder. What we typically do is we do maybe like the first 4 couplets, by which I mean, I don't know, through the 8th line all together in Hebrew. And then, and this is partly where people get lost at IKAR, then we go into, sing with me, nine, 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 na, 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 ya, na, 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 ya, na, 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 ya, na, 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 ya, na, 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 na. We might do that 2 or 3 or even 4 times, just 9, 9, 9. Now, here's a pro tip. when we do 99999 and then we come back in with words, most of the time where we're coming back in is where this little red arrow is. You see the little red arrow on the bottom of the page? Yeah, do you see it? It's usually like the final 2 or 3 lines. That's where we come back in with the words, okay? So, nine, 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 na, 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 ya, na, 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 ya, na, 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 ya, na, 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 ya, na, 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 na. Last 2 line time, sing with me. Noten lechem lechol. Okay, sorry, the English is wrong here. Okay. Noten lechem lechol basar, hileo olam chasto, hodu le'el hashamayim, hileo olam chasto. The English transliteration is wrong. That shouldn't say hashamayim. That should say lechol basar. But you get the idea, right? A lot of lie, and then back together for the last 2 lines. And the last thing I'll mention, just to do this prayer a little bit more justice than what I'm doing right now, just look at the English for a moment, right? For God's love endures forever is the refrain. And then each stanza, right? God who does all of these amazing things, who works great wonders, right? Who made the heavens, who stretched the waters, we're in creation mode, right? Who formed the great lights, that's a reference to the sun and the moon, right? And the stars. Whoa, wait a second. Big shift. Now we're in historical memory. Remember before I said prayers are sometimes an exercise in articulating important moments in our collective history. We just shifted, right? From this universal expression of what we are grateful to God for, of ways that we experience God's love. I feel God's love when I marvel at the fact that I live on a planet that has a sun that allows things to grow and a moon that makes the tides ebb and flow, right? I marvel at a universe where there's so much that is miraculous about the natural world. But then we shift into a particularistic, right? It's not my favorite. I don't need to talk about smiting the Egyptian firstborn every Shabbat morning. If I were writing this prayer, I'd probably pick a different moment from our historical memory to lift up, right? But you understand what's happening here. We also feel God's love through the exodus from Egypt. We also feel God's love when we were wandering in the wilderness and we encountered all of these enemies who wanted to end our story right there and then, but in fact, helped us get through to the other side and find our way into the land of Israel. And then I'll just point out, interestingly, the prayer gets universal again, right? From the particularistic to God who provides bread for all flesh, right? God who feeds the hungry, God who remembers us when we were low. Okay, so this prayer, it's a little bit like Dayenu at the Passover Seder, where it's like you mention each step of the way, right? If only God, if God had only taken us out from Egypt, but didn't part the sea, it would have been enough. If God had only parted the sea, but didn't let us cross onto dry land, it would have been enough. If God had only let us cross the dry land, but didn't give us the Torah, it wouldn't be enough, right? None of those really would have been enough. But that prayer is a way of breaking down the things that we're grateful for, right? It's like a itemized checklist of things that I'm thankful for. And this prayer does a version of that with Kili Olam Chasto, for God's love endures, right? Is a way of saying we feel God's love. Thank you, God, for all of these things, little and small, universal and particularistic, in history and ongoing, that we feel we receive from you. Okay. Well, I learned a lot about how I'm going to structure the next class. And I hope that you learned something too. The next class and future classes will be more diving into, like, we'll more start with the prayers, right? There won't be like, what is the Siddur and what is liturgical prayer and how did this all come to be? We'll really jump into next week from Pesukei to Zimra into the Shema and the blessings before and after the Shema, and try to do as much singing and then looking at and discussing the meaning of the prayer as possible. Send me emails, feedback, things that you want, things that worked, things that didn't work, and I'll do my best to adjust accordingly. And I will see you all next week. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
This was great. Thank you very much.
You want to say hi?
Thanks, Kennard. Thank you.
You want to say hi?
Gordy! Hey, Gordy!
Oh, wait, hold on. He's on. Oh, you want to say hi?
Hi.
Hi, Gordy. So nice to see you. Were you singing along with Mama?
Yeah.
Yeah? Oh, good.
A little.
Now that I know that you're up at 8:45 p.m., would you like to teach one of the upcoming classes?
No.
No? Maybe you can help me. Let me think. I was thinking about teaching Or Hadash that you sing at the ECC every week.
Yeah.
Maybe you could help me teach that next time?
Maybe.
Maybe.
He said
Maybe you'll go to bed earlier next time.
maybe.
Maybe.
Gotta go.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi Panitz.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone. Good to see you, Lizu. Take care.